People are blind to data and blind to facts when they're buried in a story.
I always laugh going, Google's the greatest onboarder in the world because they have a single box and you write something in it and then the world's smartest computer kicks out. The hardest thing are good checklists. If we don't actually understand what that list is for, it's just an annoying thing in the corner that we can't figure out how to turn off.
Try and get a user to that point that you know if they send a message, they're in, they get the value, their retention's high. I actually think teams should see CS as your product. These two teams can actually be extremely complementary for one another and add so much value to each other's teams. We are back with another episode of the Do As I Say, Not As I Did podcast. And as always, the name kind of explains everything. We're giving you advice based on everything we did wrong the first time. Each week I'm bringing on founders, investors, product experts, technology futurists, sales gurus, and just about anyone who is really smart and can help us work out how to build great businesses. And then together, we answer the questions about what's going on in your lives and in your businesses. We find them on Reddit or people send them through, and these are questions that the guests have never seen before. They're hearing them live for the first time, the same as you. So if you do have questions and you want us to workshop them, you want us to help put out the fires that are going on in your business, send an email through to podcast@joelditrapani.com. That's going to be on the screen, but I'm also going to put it in the show notes because that is one hell of a mouthful. I'm your host, Joel Ditrapani, and I'm the co-founder and co-CEO of Vigo, which is an edtech scale-up. We've grown through Australia and the UK, and we're now focused on the promised land, the US. On top of that, I'm also an advisor and a coach in the product space where I help startups and businesses learn how to run great product teams, because that is the secret to building great products, and it's absolutely something I got wrong for a long time. And today, I'm super excited to be joined by Bret Siers, the CEO and co-founder of Training Layers, a startup that delivers your playbook to your users where they need it, when they need it, and how they need it. In other words, Bret is creating the GPS of software. Bret has been training and developing leaders for over 27 years, so he really understands where the training space is broken and is perfectly situated to change this space. Bret is an entrepreneur, coach, educator, trainer, and father of 4. He's dedicated his life to creating an approachable path to helping people of all backgrounds and experiences so they can pursue their plans to achieve their own definition of success. Bret is an absolute expert at user onboarding and training. So let's jump into it. Welcome, Bret. Thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thanks, Joel. It's a lot of fun. Thanks for having me.
Look, mate, before we jump into the challenges, can you tell me a little bit more about Training Layers?
Yeah, so Training Layers is really designed to solve what we call is the user gap, where especially in B2B software, it's complex. And everyone says, well, it should be less complex. And I don't actually think that that's true. We're trying to solve hard problems. It's going to take multi-stepped processes to do it. The dilemma is that the users are experts at their job, not at software. They use our software to do the thing they need to. And so that gap is, how do you solve complex issues with people that aren't these experts? Well, Training Layers believes we should have a layer of training on top of the software that can deliver in-app, on-demand training from where they are, from onboarding to engagement, feature adoption, and continuous learning, all the way through that user journey on an application and then ultimately across the tech stack, so that users can actually do the thing they need to do and then move on so that they get what they need, which is their job done.
I love it. There's been so many times I'm in softwares that are just like terrible UX. And I get so lost of just like how to tie together so many things. And I think generally some softwares are getting better, but I do think it takes a long time to really get good at a software. And that was especially early in my career. Like, it wasn't just about taking on one new software, because one new software, like, maybe you can put a bit of time into like messing around, but when you've got to learn a whole new stack of softwares, it is like overwhelming.
Well, and you're a tech person, right? I always laugh, right? I ran a professional services company for a long time, right? I work with people that can barely spell tech, right? It's just, that's not their world. They're teachers or architects or engineers, and they're like, that's their job, and they've got this tool. We have a tendency in software to think from our worldview of sort of the pain points that we have, not the end user that's going to use this, and then sort of the last piece to this is the power of why, I think, is important. We lose that, right? There's all this why selling today, right? Social selling on, LinkedIn and all this other stuff that really tries to emotionally grab the user and the buyer as to why this is important. And then the moment we onboard, we're staring at a blank dashboard and we have no context. And then they start throwing hows at us and we don't even know why it's important. And so the ability to deliver a why layer to a user, to have the founder, have the CEO, have you over their shoulder being, hey, here's why we did this, here's why this is important, can release some stress, give them context, and then drive. And so that's one of our like bigger picture things is, can we infuse why into the storytelling of the software itself through the journey?
I love that. It reminds me of like one of my favorite quotes, and I always say this is one of my favorite quotes, and I still don't know who it's by, and if I'm butchering it, but they said, people are blind to data and blind to facts when they're buried in a story. So like, the story is the important thing. That's what people remember. So if you want people to remember a message, like you give that story there. So giving that story the whole way through a platform, like I love that idea. Let's call that there before I ask you 1,000 more questions about this, because I love the idea, as we've talked about offline. But and we'll jump into some of the challenges for today. So this challenge is called onboarding processes. I'm working on developing our startup's onboarding process a little more. What softwares have you really enjoyed the onboarding processes for? Please share. I'll sign up for trials or short term to see what it's like and about what's good about theirs so I can improve my own. Let me know if you have any experiences and what the top onboarding processes are. From 8-Bit Oracle. So you've probably done a lot of research on this now, Bret. Like, you would know what are good experiences. What have you personally enjoyed being onboarded to?
I guess the question is, what systems do a nice job of telling that story? And that's a really interesting question, because the motivation factor comes in. Right? Some of it's really, really simple. I always laugh going, Google's the greatest onboarder in the world because they have a single box and you write something in it and then the world's smartest computer kicks out. ChatGPT has beat that because now it's putting personas behind it. So, but you know, when you start thinking about what good software is, everyone's trying. I have more examples of what's not where you want to go than where you do. But the one thing that I would say is there are softwares out there that do a good job of saying, do you want to learn this now or do you want to dismiss it? And giving people that sense of control and freedom becomes really, really important.
Yeah. Google's a pretty good one, you know, especially because they've controlled not even just like the software, but how you get to it. Like, they own Chrome. Like, when you're going even to enter to use the Google software, I hate to call it that, but whatever we want to call it, like, they've even controlled the inflow point. I do think, you know, that I've seen more training in softwares, but I think you're right. Like, there's a lot of software out there that has terrible onboarding processes, but one that sticks out to me that has a pretty good onboarding process, even though it's a difficult onboarding process, but I think it's a really good one, is Slack. So I recently just redid the Slack onboarding process because I wanted to see how they did it. And I don't know if you've done it recently, Bret, but like, when I went into it, they were so persistent about making me do like 3 or 4 major actions. And what I liked about it is that when I had finished on Slack, like finished creating a brand new workspace, my workspace was usable and it was like I had gotten some value out of it. So that, like, the onboarding process was hard. So like, it pissed me off. But at the end of it, like, I feel like I've really understood the value of the platform.
Yeah. Well, and it sounds like, I mean, in that process, it's interesting. It's always a challenge of, am I instructing or am I facilitating? And so what the ones that instruct, we have a tendency to skip, where it's like, hey, learn this, and learn this. And we just, like, the little tours, and we skip them because we don't understand why it's important. But what you talked about with Slack, and there's other ones that are like, hey, get this done, and then you'll actually learn and do. And what Slack has learned in that is they have these critical features. They're like, if we can get people to do these 3 things, we have a 96% retention. And so let's just drive people to that so that we know that when they get through it, it's going to be set up and they're not going anywhere. And so I don't remember his name, but like, your onboarding is, what are the critical things that deliver your aha, where they're like, oh, that's awesome, and drive them specifically there to be able to have them tell that experience.
Yeah, I do think over different versions of my own onboarding, I've tried to focus a lot on, like, I guess, like, beautiful UI and stuff like that. But I guess points of value is a really easy way to say it. You know, what are the points where someone gets value, and then from there, how do they actually go about Forcing might be too strong of a word, but how do you encourage and facilitate someone to create value in that process, opposed to, just making it nice and giving as many tooltips as you can?
Well, and you can ask them, right? Do you want to do this? We found that this is one of the key factors. If you do this, right? And when you come on, you're like, hey, welcome. Let's help you set it up. This is the outcome we want to get you to. Would you like some help? And so all of a sudden, they're like, yeah, I need to do that. And you can now guide them, and you're no longer forcing them, you're facilitating.
Yeah, and I guess, is that one of the ideas, behind everything you're building? It's about it's not about educating as much, but facilitating through education.
Yeah, because, I think I said it earlier, but there's an old school premise of if you say it, they doubt it. If they say it, it's true. And so if we can get buy-in, right, change is done with understanding why. And so introducing that why and giving that context, people will move significantly faster and stronger because they need that motivation, and doubt undermines motivation.
I guess as you go through this, building your own business in this space, have you come across any patterns? It sounds like maybe onboarding is just, it's custom to you, work out the value you're providing and how a user gets that inside your platform. But are there patterns you've seen that are just objectively true? If you can get a user to do X, Y, Z, they have more success. Are there patterns within onboarding that you're aware of?
Yeah, so almost every software company, if they've done their data analytics, they know these are the critical. So we talk about the critical features, and then we've all heard of the happy path, right? We think of the golden path, and that is the pathway to those critical features. And so when we talk with someone, we're like, outline it. What is it? How do you ring that bell? Right? And it's fascinating because a lot of us don't know, right? A lot of software founders and a lot of folks that are building, they're like, well, this is cool and this is cool. And they start listing their features. But there's something that somebody says, the thing I was reminded of a long time ago was, people are already solving this problem. They're solving it online. They're solving it in Excel. They're solving it somewhere. And so we're like, can we make that solve more fun and easier for them and repeatable? And so being able to do that is everything. So when you think about, are there knowns? Yeah, what are those things? And then that's the hardest thing that I have found talking with folks is they have a hard time articulating. Just like building an ICP is really hard. Building a deck is really hard because refining that language is really hard. Identifying our key features is actually sort of hard.
Yeah. I guess, when you think about the building of the onboarding, it's so easy to just build something that looks good or to say, Facebook did this or whoever did it. That's such an easy way to go down because building at the end of the day, it can be easy. There is an absolute known fact there. If we want a button, we can have a button. But it sounds like the real value in good onboarding and good activation is from really deeply understanding the journey and then making sure you can get a user to getting value out of your platform as soon as possible or understanding the points at which they get a lot of value and workshopping that flow to push as many people to that as possible.
Yeah, and knowing their roles, right? I did a talk on the difference between the role of a buyer, a champion, and a user because they're very different motivations. And so the processes are going to be very different. A lot of times people build onboarding for the buyer.
Yeah.
Because they're the ones making the decision and the users don't care about that particular flow at all. And so the software gets adopted, but then it gets churned because when it gets handed off to the users, it's just a different flow. And so thinking through that, who's going to use it, who's going to upsell, who's going to lock it in, all of those things is really where we found the work needs to be done. And then you can facilitate it, right? You build it in your head, you build it on paper, then you build it in real life. We sometimes skip one of those steps.
Yeah. I guess, if I think about this in the opposite then, what are some things in onboarding that just don't work? Where are there things because everyone just thinks, add tooltips. Are tooltips good? Are modals good? What are the parts of onboarding that are maybe some misconceptions that actually aren't leading us down the right path?
Well, I think the hardest thing are good checklists. I mean, the interesting thing is those tours, those passive, hey, skip here, like move here, the click-through rate of those are so high, or the skips, like, and you can sort of tell, are they actually doing it, or are they just waiting to get done? And so actually building that and giving context for why you're doing it is important. The checklists are a weird thing because we all like, not everyone, but a lot of people like lists, right? You're like, oh, I got to do this, and I got to do this, I got to do this. But again, if we don't actually understand what that list is for, what do we get from completing that list? It's just an annoying thing in the corner that we can't figure out how to turn off.
Yeah.
Right? And so it's always that emotional experience. So because we're software that's going to sit on companies' platforms, we work really hard and think about not getting people annoyed with it, because we're there to help, but we have a tendency to get frustrated with things that are like, why are you even asking me to do this? And the software is not answering, but it's that space. So that's what we're finding.
Okay. So it feels like, the things not to do in this space are, don't just build onboarding hacks because you see other people have them. Because at the end of the day, you can piss your users off more than anything else if you just stick something on their screen. So you've got to be very conscious about, adding value the whole way through. So if I try and bring this one to a bit of a close here, into a bit of a final judgment for 8-bit Oracle here, where they're asking for like, what are some good onboarding processes? And it's a hard one to answer because they're just, onboarding is so specific to what the platform's trying to achieve, who it's for. I personally just like Slack as an example, but there are plenty out there. Google is just, type in what you want. ChatGPT is so clear. The onboarding there is so simple because the value's up front. But if I'm to summarize what makes one good, what makes something good is getting a user. I guess first of all, it's understanding who your user is, and what their experience needs to be in your platform, and what value is that you are giving them, and at what point to actually get that value. So once you understand that, you can actually frame up your whole onboarding process around helping your user experience those points of value. So know that when a certain user, I keep nearly saying student, so everyone can probably nearly hear me say student, and I keep correcting myself because my users are students. So try and get a user to that point that if they send a message, they're in, they get the value, their retention's high, and understand what that point is, and do that above all else, and then build everything about your onboarding to facilitate that one piece of that one single interaction. And on the inverse, don't just fall prey to, here's a tooltip, here's a modal, here's a checklist, because a checklist could be worth nothing if there's just random shit on it. Deeply understand how to encourage your user to get into that place. Understand which user needs to take which actions, and design it out from there. How does that sound, Brett? Anything missed in that?
I think it sounds perfect.
All right.
No, I think it's right.
All right. Well, that's 8-bit Oracle. That is your advice. We'll close that one out. So we'll move on to another question here. This challenge is called Relationships with Customer Success. I'm currently a customer success manager for a tool that is utilized by product teams. I'm in the unique position of not only working with product managers at my own company, but also working with our customers who are mostly product leaders, usually CPOs or VP levels at enterprise SaaS and larger e-commerce companies. I've seen the relationship between CS and product have a range from very tight-knit and collaborative at my previous smaller company to a bit icy at my current one. I'm curious to get some unfiltered opinions on how product managers perceive CS and what the relationship is like at your companies. And this question is from Longhorn in NYC. And I love that name because Brett and I are in Austin right now, and the Longhorns are the Austin team, which I know because I'm a sports guy. And I know that UT Austin says Hook'em, so Hook'em Longhorn. But yeah, I thought I was keen on your views on this, Brett, because when I actually first met Brett, he was doing a big presentation to a huge startup group in Austin, and he spoke a lot about the power of CS. So how do you see that relationship between product and CS? Because I know you're pretty pro, but I'd love your thoughts on that.
Well, I think it's an interesting thing when you start thinking about what is that dynamic. So no one likes being told what they're doing is wrong. And so some of the folks within the CS space, they have a tendency, because if all day long you're navigating problems, you're getting phone calls and you're having to explain the same thing over and over again, it becomes frustrating. It can seem like a simple fix. And so you then go to the project team and you're like, this is the problem. Why aren't you guys fixing it? And they're like, are you kidding? And so it can be two different sets of frustrations versus we're on the same team and we understand that this is here. We've got to get good at communicating that so that they're complementing each other rather than, sort of being obstructions in each other's jobs. And I think I've seen both sort of dynamics, and that's a hard one when they become opposing forces.
Yeah, I've absolutely had both scenarios in my own company. So at different points in my company's life, I've led CS and I've led product, and now I'm actually leading both. And I've been in the world where I've created opposing forces, not on purpose, but I've created opposing forces, and I've also created like very complementary teams. And honestly, like when these teams work together, the whole company is happier and more productive and creating more value for our customers. And I actually think there's I think in general, like CS and product like need to work really closely together. These two teams can actually be extremely complementary for one another and add so much value to each other's teams. When CS is feeding the right information into product and product is doing the right work with CS, both teams can achieve significantly more. Because CS or customer success, they're on the coalface, They are the interface. In a lot of ways, I actually think teams should see CS as your product because they are a version of your product. Like they're not your platform, but they are part of your offering, and your whole offering is your product. And so like they get unique bits of information that if distilled in the right way can be super valuable. But then vice versa, if they don't believe where the product's going and stuff like that, they can represent it poorly, they can implement it wrong. Like if they don't deeply understand the product and where the product's going as well, they can go in two different directions. So I would say what's really important, and at least for me internally in my own team, is when both teams are incentivized to run in opposite directions, you create tension. But when both teams are incentivized with the same outcomes, they work in harmony. And for a long time, we had a product strategy that was pulling in a little bit of a different direction to the strategy that PS or the CS team was pulling in. And so when we were able to align those, the teams worked a whole lot more effectively. And we end up having like a strategy that both teams had like enough of a Venn diagram overlap of what they wanted to achieve. And it's because product took the time to understand what customer success was trying to achieve and where their pain points were, and vice versa. Customer success knew where the future of the product was going, not just what it was now. And I think that needs to get driven from the top down. And when you drive that down and you have a leader driving the collaboration between the teams, that's when it happens. I believe so anyway.
The one thing that I've seen is when the product team's roadmap keeps changing or not delivering or like that. And so CS is out going, okay, hey, we're going to bite the bullet on this because it's not there. But next quarter, or they're making these promises. They're like the new school salespeople that are promising here's where the delivery is. And when that roadmap changes and they're not integrated in that, they sort of find out at the end. That's sort of where those ripples start.
Yeah.
And then they get frustrated and go back and they're like, why do you need to know? And then we start like, which one's more important? And so from the top, but things are going to happen, right? Things change, right? We got to be agile. Things are going to move. But being a clear picture that our North Star hasn't changed, but our pathway might, right? The bridge went out over there, so we got to go around the mountain. None of us wanted to go around the mountain, but the bridge is out. So let's pack up and let's get around the mountain so we can get to where we need to. And so that vision helps to keep both sides going.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I actually think what you're talking about here is a lack of trust. And that definitely happened to us. Like I'm super open about this, is that for a long time we built a very shitty product team. And it's because I was the leader of it and I didn't know how to build a product team. And so my product team didn't deliver and it was constantly just like waving around in the wind and like there was no consistency. There was like every delivery was late and like shitty. But now that we have a product team that is like super high functioning and constantly like just making the product way better and clear about where we're going, the CS team like loves our product team because like they agree with what they're working on, all their feedback's getting fed into that, and they can actually trust that things are going to happen, and they know things change, but as long as you have a good product team, I think that's key. But also the same as like with the CS team, I think a lot of the time product can get frustrated with CS because CS can just blame product for things being wrong. Whereas like, no, like you've still got to implement this well. The users still have to use it to get the value out of this. And I do think, maybe one thing here is trust. First thing is you need to have good teams there. If one of your teams is shitty, that's just going to cause tension in either one. So if you have two good teams and then you have two teams trusting each other and they're aligned, that's when I think you have great harmony and you can create a lot of value.
Yeah, I agree.
Awesome. All right. Well, maybe we'll close this one out here. So how do product teams see CS? Well, I think it depends on the team, but I think like they should see them as like this extremely valuable asset and thought partner. And we constantly have our own CS team helping drive our product strategy. And so I think these teams very much as best friends, and they should see each other out, and the leaders should be very collaborative. And
best friends is a good. I'm gonna jump in, but best friends is a good thing because they should also be able to call each other shit.
Yeah.
Like when there's a problem, we actually need discourse. So I don't want this being like, oh, it should all be like holding hands and frolicking in the park. Like if someone's messing up, there needs to be that trust. That's like, look, we said we were going to hit this. This is where this is. Like we have to get that done because we're losing these customers or this isn't happening.
Yeah.
So I love the idea of that best friend because you've got to be able to have some hard conversations sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. Like that's actually true for every team though. Like your leaders and your whole team needs to be like very able to call each other's bullshit. So one of our values as a company is radical candor because we want each other to be able to say like, hey Bret, you actually fucked this thing up. Like I need you to change this. Here's what you did and here's how maybe don't say it like that. That's just my version. Maybe it's more obnoxious aggression, but you need to be able to have very transparent, direct conversations with each other. And you should want that too. You need to hold yourself to high standards and hold your team to high standards. So, and just to summarize where I think, what makes two teams like this work in harmony, it's aligned goals. You're both running in the same direction. You're rowing in the same direction. You're all working towards that same goal. You have two high performing teams, so you can radically trust one another. And then very open communication where you see the value of each other's teams and how that impacts the work you're doing now and in the future. And that's it. Longhorn in NYC. We'll see you when you're back in Austin. And that's your advice. We'll close that one out too. So we've gone well over our allotted time for 2 questions. So that's actually all the time we have to answer questions today, but we do have time for plug. So jumping to the favorite part of the show, plugs. This is what everyone's really been waiting for, Bret. So tell us what's going on in your world. What would you like to plug?
So beginning of November, we're launching Training Layers out commercially. So we're onboarding from the wait list right now. We're really, really excited about what this can do and changing the game on being able to make software approachable and helping people execute. So we'd love for anyone to see this to come check it out. We're booking demos and having conversations and anything we can do to answer some questions and really, really move the needle on this. So I appreciate this and would love to talk to anybody.
Love it. And I'll also put, Bret's socials in here too. Bret's also sometimes does presentations about customer onboarding and customer success as well, which are great to go to. So he'll post about them on his LinkedIn if you want to go check them out in Austin. And then on my side, do not forget to like and subscribe and comment. So pull out your phone right now, go to YouTube, like and subscribe to all of the videos and put comments in. Just nice things, just say nice things. We love nice compliments. And then as always, I condone stealing. So steal someone's phone and like and subscribe on their phone too. And then give it back because they'll enjoy the new podcast on their phone. Thanks to everyone who writes these questions in. We love these problems. If you've got questions and challenges in your own business, send them through. We'll workshop them with a future guest. So send those through to podcast@joelditrapani.com. And lastly, I love having conversations. So if you've got challenges or questions or you just want to chat, book some time with me. I've got a booking link in the show notes. So just click that, find some time and let's get on a call. If you've got feedback about the podcast, I'd love to know too, so send that through as well. And that's it. We'll wrap this one up. Bret, thank you so much for coming on, man. I've really enjoyed this conversation. These were great perspectives. I'd not thought about this in a lot of these ways.
Well, I appreciate it. This has been a lot of fun. So, and I learned a lot. It's funny. We had a goal, and I said I always like polling little nuggets, and I got one. So I know what we'll be talking about 6 months from now.
I love it. I love it. Well, look, this has been another episode of the Do As I Say, Not As I Did podcast. We'll see you all next week.